Now for today's program. Jane Eisner is a journalist, educator, and nonprofit leader. From 1980 to 2005, she worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer. She was then the editor in chief of The Forward from 2008 to 2019. She is known for her interviews with President Barack Obama, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Jane has served as Director of Academic Affairs and an adjunct professor at Columbia School of Journalism and has taught at the University of Pennsylvania, Wesleyan University, and Bryn Mawr College. Jane's work has appeared in the New York Times and the Washington Post, among many other publications, and she's the author of Taking Back the Vote, Getting American Youth Involved in Our Democracy, and her latest book is Carole King, She Made the Earth Move. Amy E. Schwartz is Moment Magazine's opinion and books editor, as well as editor of the magazine's popular Ask the Rabbi section, which she won, and she has won first place in commentary from the Religion News Association. Before coming to Moment, Amy was a longtime editorial writer and op-ed columnist at the Washington Post, where she was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in commentary. Amy is president of the non-denominational Jewish Studies Center in Washington, D.C., and is the editor of the book, Can Robots Be Jewish? And Other Pressing Questions of Modern Life. Please welcome Jane Eisner and Amy E. Schwartz.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thank you, everybody. Jane, thanks so much for coming on today. The book's just out, so congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
I want to thank you not only for writing this lovely book, but for giving me the occasion to prepare for this Zoominar, which I've never enjoyed prep so much because I went back and I listened to all the iconic albums and all the clips. And
Mhm.
I particularly want to say I think there's quite a large audience out there. But toward the end, I came across a reference. Somebody said, "Oh, and if you want a real ugly cry, go and watch the clip from the 2015 Kennedy Center Honors."
Yes.
Where Aretha Franklin
Oh,
is singing "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," and Carole
oh,
King is in the box with her rosette on, and she's just losing her mind, and the whole
yes.
hall is singing along. So I would say read Jane's book, buy it and read it, but also definitely go look at this clip.
Oh, I'm with you, Amy. I think I've seen it like 50 times.
Yeah, it's a goodie.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let me let's get to what we're doing. And I think we have a pretty big crowd out here online, and obviously that's a tribute to not only to your book but to the topic, to the
Mhm.
importance of Carole King to a whole generation, and as you argue in the book, maybe several generations, especially of women, but of everybody, that pivotal era, all surrounding 1971.
Mhm.
So let's talk first about the backstory. How did you and this topic come together? Had you always been a super fan?
Yes, I certainly was. I mean, I first encountered her like so many of us did in 1971. I was a teenager. Tapestry came out. The songs were amazing. Here was somebody singing them who also had curly hair. And I was from the Bronx and she was from Brooklyn. And even though I'm younger than she is, it just felt like she was speaking to me and people like me. And that had never happened before. And I followed her career, listened to her albums, saw her in concert, saw the play on Broadway several times. And I was approached by Jewish Lives and the Yale University Press to make a suggestion about a book I might write for the series. And I suggested her. There has never been a standalone biography of her. She wrote her memoirs in 2012, and there's another group biography that came out about 20 years ago. So I thought that there was really space for a longer treatment of just her life and her consequential music. So that's how this all came about.
Parenthetically, I've always wondered how the Jewish Lives things work, and that's interesting to hear that they approach you and ask suggestions. That's very cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So before we jump plunge into the book itself, I just want to go one step. Maybe this is an intrusive question, but people often have, the sound, these songs are the soundtracks of their lives.
Mhm.
Is there anything special? I mean, can you tell us a story about a particular track or a particular time or place in your life?
Well, Tapestry came out in 1971. In the summer of 1972, I went on USY on Wheels. I don't know if that still exists anymore, but it's a cross-country trip. You stay in people's homes for the most part, or kind of crappy hotels. But it was wonderful. I always wanted to go cross-country. My father never could take us, and so um, and there was a lot of time on the bus, and we spent so many hours singing Will You Love Me Tomorrow. I mean, nonstop. It became the anthem of that trip. Of course, other songs as well, especially You've Got a Friend, but somehow that captured, and not just for the young women, the girls on the trip, but for the guys too. It just, that sort of innocent uncertainty about having some kind of romantic encounter and then wondering whether it will last, whether it was real. Again, that really spoke to us. And it's also just a kind of easy song to sing. And I have a distinct memory of that.
That's great. That's funny. And you were teenagers then.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's great. So, okay. So, let's start. One interesting thing about this book, as you said before, is it's a Jewish life.
Hmm.
So I'm sure, you had to think a lot about what made Carole King's life a Jewish life.
Hmm.
So let's start with that. Let's talk about Carole King's Jewish background and what you found out about all of that.
Well, if people don't know, her given name was Carol Joan Klein. Uh, Her father, Sid Klein, New York City firefighter, mother, Jeannie Klein, who later in life became involved in theater and performance. But of course, she was a 1950s housewife, so the most she could do with her musical talent was give piano lessons. Um, and they were both children, grandchildren of immigrants. And I do think that shaped Carol, the striving, the ambition, the desire to be excellent, to be accepted in society. Th that was all around her. She grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, Sheepshead Bay, Gravesend area, filled with a lot of other, you know, Jewish families, working class families who were also trying to grasp onto the American dream. Anti-Semitism, which had surged after World War II, was starting to abate a lot in the 50s. There was more assimilation, there were more legal challenges to discrimination. So there wasn't as much stopping her from getting on that subway, taking it to Midtown and knocking on the doors and trying to sell her songs. She was Jewish in a particular way. We might call it secular Jewish, or there's another term that's often used, Jews of no religion. People who feel Jewish, her family didn't belong to a synagogue, far as I can tell. And there's a reason for that. But it was in the air. You weren't religiously observant. I think sort of the pillars of American Jewish life are remembrance of the Holocaust and loyalty to Israel. Israel was not a big issue for a lot of Jews in the 1950s. The Holocaust, it was the opposite. It was too soon, really, to start dealing with it. A little bit, but not a lot. And so instead, they had this kind of culture that was surrounded around food, what food you ate, celebrating Passover, that sort of thing. But the closest thing I could say, actually, and I could say this to a Jewish audience, it it was kind of like being a Chilunim in Israel. You feel Jewish, and you always go to your mother's house for Friday night dinner, and then you go to the beach on Saturday. And I think that's that sort of special character that existed, especially in the outer boroughs of New York, um, in that post-war period.
Well, it's interesting. I'm a little younger and I grew up in Manhattan, but I think there's that same, what you're saying
Mhm.
resonates because when everyone around you is Jewish, the
Yeah.
question of what you do or what you think about it doesn't even come up. It's like that joke about the fish. One of them says, what the hell is water?
Yes.
Like there's Judaism everywhere. And so,
Yeah.
um, do you think, I mean, just stepping both of us for one moment back into our identities as people who have done a lot of Jewish journalism,
Mhm.
is that a way of being Jewish that exists now? I mean, are people still growing up that way with no real questions about it, do you think?
Oh, I don't think it can exist this way because especially of social media. So even if you're in this kind of largely monolithic community, you're just so much more aware of what else is out there. But I do think that there's a large cohort of American Jews who may not belong to a synagogue, but who identify culturally Jewish. They may go to Jewish films or eat Jewish food, have, incredible debates about Israel and other things like that. Um, so I do think there's a version of that exists now.
So just and it doesn't come into her art very much, but it's there, right? It's in, I mean, do you feel it at all in her art, or is that just a
I think personally that while I don't know that the Jewish aspect of her identity seeps into her songs, I do think some of her songs can be read as having a spiritual dimension to them.
Mm,
Uh, Now that's my own reading, maybe my own desire to read them that way. But I think it's legitimate. And also, she did have attachment to Jewish rituals. She has four children. The youngest was a boy, is a man, and she was very intent on having him have a bar mitzvah. I was able to track down the rabbi from that, even the bar mitzvah tutor. It
wow.
sounds like he wasn't really into it, but how many boys are? Um, so that was important to her. There was a rabbi officiated at her mother's funeral. Both her mother and her father are buried in Jewish ways. Um, and so I think at those touchstones in one's life, which I think is true for a lot of people, they kind of go back to that. They need that at those times of life. And that was certainly true of her.
Just out of curiosity, parenthetically, what are the songs that feel spiritual to you?
Oh, well, again, it's how you read them. I think You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman can
Mm,
be like that. Um, uh, she said that when she wrote You've Got a Friend, it just kind of came through her. And I think that sense of having um, reliance on someone and being able to reach out to someone is that. There's a later song past Tapestry called "You Light Up My Life,"
hmm
um, which I've just come to love a lot, and I think too you could read that in a kind of different way.
That's
And you
fun.
know what? That's because these are great
Yeah.
songs.
Anyone. Yeah, I think that actually, I think You've Got a Friend is often used in Christian liturgy, but I might just be imagining that
Mm,
because it fits, in its
yeah.
way. So anyway, so back to Sheepshead Bay. Tell us more about, particularly her high school sounds crazy and amazing. Tell us about
Yeah,
James Madison High School.
it really was. So it was and is a very large school, takes up a whole city block. Um, you know, Big student body. When she was going there, again, filled with a lot of children of Jewish immigrants, sometimes Italian. The school had a big emphasis on music. And to this day, it still does. Like you walk in the building, I mean, now they're, security detectors, but and there's this very wide kind of hallway, lobby, and on either end of that part of the high school are two pianos. One is actually named and dedicated to her, although she didn't show up for that, and another for another alums, and they're just there. And when I visited the school, I noticed that. a student just came over and started playing on one of the pianos. And to me, that represents kind of the atmosphere of the school then and now. Um, there was a long tradition which sadly stopped during COVID, and I understand there are people who are trying to bring it back. It was called Sing, and every year, the students from each grade would write and put on a performance, musical performance, to the rest of the student body, and the student body would pick the best one. And every year that Carole King was involved, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, her grade won. And that kind of became her identity there as somebody associated with piano playing and music. Um, and then there were just the extraordinary people around her. You know, Bernie Sanders was the class behind her. There was a time when there were three members of the United States Senate, 3% of the Senate, who are graduates of James Madison High School, and there's still two of them are still there, Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer, and also Norm Coleman.
Huh.
And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, tons of Nobel laureates. It represents, I think, a kind of amalgam of striving and intelligence and creativity and chutzpah. Schumer says, I learned two things in James Madison High School, class smarts and street smarts. But it's a very cool place. And even though Madison itself, I think, is quite special. There are other high schools in that area of not only Brooklyn but also in part in Queens that at that time in the 50s really gave rise to just amazing talent. Barbara Streisand, Paul Simon, Neil Sedaka, all from that same milieu.
Sounds like the school sort of took its coloration from this incredibly creative, incredibly striving immigrant population that was around
Mhm.
there, and then in turn, right, and then in turn it starts to give it back as a resource.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's very interesting. What's the population, if you were out there reporting, what's the population of that area now for the school? I mean, it's probably still immigrant, yes?
Oh, very much so. Oh gosh, I can't remember now. You know, just getting into the school took me, years. And then they selected some students to bring me around. And they were just delightful. And they were from all over the place, a lot from East Asia, Central Asia, and it just a real variety of students there. When Carole King was there, there were, I think, almost a dozen members of her graduating class with the last name of Levine. Just gives you an idea of what it
Right.
was like. Now, totally different. But I used to be an education reporter. My feeling is you know what a school is like within 5 or 10 minutes of being there. You walk the halls and you just get a sense of it. And it still seems like a pretty wonderful place.
Still producing, who knows, the stars of
Yeah.
tomorrow, right? Well,
Yeah.
and I guess even I don't want to dwell on this overly, but at the in the 50s, it already had been that way for a while, right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg's considerably older.
Yes.
She's there
Yeah.
a couple decades before,
Yes.
and this is an interest. It was a little thread in the book that you kept referring to, but there's never a whole story. So, like this business about Carole King's mother, encouraging her seemingly at various times, helping her
Yes.
go and knock on, a producer's door out of nowhere.
Hmm.
One of the versions you offer is that somehow it was actually the mother who made the connection. I mean,
Yeah.
was the mother sort of not to be too stereotypical, was the mother kind of a Marjorie Morningstar type, a
Um,
frustrated actress herself?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how frustrated she was. It's just like there were limits of what women could do at that time. But she very much was a stage mother. I mean, I think that she recognized really early the kind of talent that her daughter had. She started giving her piano lessons when she was 4 years old. The story is that she couldn't even reach the keys, young Carol. She had to sit on what they called telephone books in
Oh,
those days.
telephone books. I
Remember
remember
that?
those.
Um, so yeah, I do think that she pushed her, but it wasn't resisted, except for one thing, which is she really wanted Carol to go to the High School for Performing Arts, which is a
Mm.
very big deal. And the first time Carol applied, she didn't get in. So she applied again the next year and she did get in. So she actually spent the first semester of 10th grade. High school was just 3 years then. First semester of 10th grade at the Performing Arts High School. And she left after that and went to James Madison. And she said, the commute was really long. It was exhausting. The other students in the school were like into going to Broadway and Hollywood, and that was not her thing at all. She just wanted to write music. And that, she doesn't really spell it out in her memoir. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to interview her directly. But you get the sense that that took a lot of chutzpah to make that decision. I would suspect her mother wasn't so happy about it at first. So yeah, there was that kind of dynamic between them.
Interesting. And yet she doesn't do it because she's not interested in her art. She's
Right.
just, she knows exactly, who knows. Now I'm based on your guesses, I'm guessing. But,
Yeah.
she pursues it in a way that's organic to her life.
Yes. And I think she wanted to be around her friends, be in her neighborhood. Very understandable.
Sure. No, that makes sense. So that brings us to well, okay, let's just go a little farther into the story since you've come that far. So she graduates from James Madison High School. By then, she's already made a connection. She's gone and recorded some songs in what was then sort of no longer exactly Tin Pan Alley, but almost, right? So
No,
tell us.
well, by then the Center of Music Production had gone uptown, Times
Sure.
Square to the Brill Building in that area.
I almost got married in the Brill Building.
Really?
I
Oh my
think for a
goodness.
while it was a venue, like an event venue. I think that's
Oh,
its
that's great.
afterlife.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but anyway, so go on. So anyways, and that's another sort of Jewish venue, right? Although,
Oh, totally. So for people who don't know, the Brill Building is a real building. It also is kind of the name of the era in the 50s and early 60s where music was produced in like a factory. There were these little cubicles. There were composers and lyricists writing desperately, trying to get the next hit song for this growing teenage market. It was very atomized. So one person wrote the music, one the lyrics, one produced it, one performed it, somebody else distributed it. Um, and it was very Jewish. She didn't actually work in the Brill building. She worked in another building on Broadway, just a block or two down. And by then, she was married to her first husband, Jerry Goffin, whom she met at Queens College. And they were surrounded by other pairs of Jewish musicians, uh, Burt Bacharach and Hal David, Cynthia Weil and Barry Mann, on and on. And, they weren't picked because of that, but they were really able to imagine this new form of music that was going to meet the demand of this new market.
and he's writing her lyrics, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
it's a real team effort.
yes.
Huh. And so when does the great breakout come? I mean, not for a while, right?
Well, Will You Love Me Tomorrow was their first really, really big song. And at that point, in fact, it's funny, when it reached a certain amount of sales, the record producer, Donnie Kirshner, picks up Carole King at their home and they drive to this chemical company. Jerry Goffin was a chemist. He was a
Mm.
chemistry major and he's working in some company. And they go and they pick him up and Apparently, he says he never had to work again. They finally realized that they could make a living doing this.
Because they had this one big hit.
Yes, and many
Right.
others followed after that.
How did it work? It wasn't, they weren't writing sheet music anymore, right? This was all going, it would go on the radio and then, or you'd issue it as an album, or what was
Well,
the,
it's
or,
interesting, Amy. Actually, what you did was you wrote the song, usually then played it for Donnie Kirshner or other people, and if the producer liked it, then you would record what they call a demo,
Mhm.
which was generally Carole King playing and singing the song. Now, she has an amazing voice. She's not Barbara Streisand. Um, and these early demos, like, had no accompaniment or anything. It was just her at a piano playing it. And then the idea was that the producer would send these demos out to to different companies and radio stations and performers, do you want to record this yourself? And the protocol was that when they got sent out, they were supposed to be returned. But apparently, her demos were rarely returned. People really wanted to hold on to them. And in fact, there has been an album of her demos
Huh.
that you can listen to. It's great. So that's how it was done. It wasn't so much sheet music anymore. That was a Tin Pan Alley kind of way of doing it. But in this case, you actually played the music, but just to, the first stage in this factory-like production.
And then the artists, the established artists, if they like it, they take it up and they sort of put it into circulation.
Yes, well, you're right. Oftentimes you're writing for a particular artist. Sometimes you're just writing and hoping an artist will take it. But her Goffin and King's really two breakout, absolutely memorable songs, Will You Love Me Tomorrow and Natural Woman, were both interestingly written expressly for Black women. Will You
Mm.
Love Me Tomorrow was for the Shirelles, this Black women's group, and Natural Woman was, of course, famously written for Aretha Franklin.
Tell that
And
story. That's a great story. It's in the book. Probably
yeah,
a lot of the fans have heard it, but I like it.
oh, it is wonderful. So Goffin and King by then had moved to New Jersey, to suburbs. She loved it. He hated it. But in any case, they were working in Midtown Manhattan. They're walking along the sidewalk to get their car out of parking lot. Jerry Wexler pulls up. He's also a producer, rolls down his window and says, I need a song for Aretha. Write this right now. And they said, what? And he says, yeah, call it Natural Woman. And so they get their car, they're racing home, they're listening to a gospel station in from Newark just to get into the mood. And they write this, amazing song on so many levels. The lyrics are poetic. The music, I mean, it does sound like you're in a church. And
Mhm.
and here are these two Jewish kids were writing this. And anyhow, the rest is kind of history. But if you look at the music, the actual sheet music, you will see that Jerry Wexler's name is credited there
With the
along
title.
with Goffin and King because he gave them the title.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I,
Yeah.
you don't get into this at all in the book, and it's one of these very giant subjects that maybe is unanswerable. But what's the story there? I mean, why are all these Jewish, um, songwriters? What's the nature of the synergy there with these
Hmm.
Black artists and these Jewish songwriters? I mean, I understand there were, Jews sort of in the distribution business for the Black songwriters, but how
Well, I
did it
think some
work?
of it, I hope I did describe this. This was also a moment in time where there was a kind of natural integration
Mhm.
among different groups in New York for sure. I mean, it starts even when she's in high school and she goes to hear some Black musicians, and it was like, whoa, it just was something really new to her. And then as she's coming along, there was, this sense of writing for other people. This was the beginning of the time when Black musicians were starting to penetrate white markets.
Hmm.
So there's that. There's also the emigration of Puerto Ricans to New York City, bringing with them a lot of Latin influences. And it kind of created this cultural mishmash that also was really, really creative and and kind of naturally integrated. I mean, there still were hierarchies, and racial divisions. I mean, you had white people writing for black people, but you really didn't have black people writing for white people. So there was still that. Um, but it was a special time, and to some degree, in the next stage of her life, the singer-songwriter stage, where kind of folk music and rock and roll really happened, that was a kind of resegregation of music, and certainly the community in Laurel Canyon that produced so many great great songs and albums just in Los Angeles in the late 60s, early 70s, that was largely a white group of musicians.
Hmm.
So there was something special, I think, about what was happening in New York at that time.
Well, I mean, when I listened again during this, when I was having fun prepping for this, and I went back and listened to Tapestry, and I hadn't really appreciated how much of a black influence sound there is
Hmm.
in parts of that. I mean, even the way
Yes,
she uses her voice,
yes,
you can tell that's the milieu, which is interesting.
yes, yeah.
So, okay, so let's go on with, I don't want to make you tell the whole story, but marriage breaks up, she goes to California, and she enters this what you call the second act, this stage of her life. Is that basic sound that, with like the demos, is that part of what lays down this sort of simple, straightforward sound that she's using on Tapestry? I mean, it's really just her and the piano.
Yes. I think a lot of this was guided by Lou Adler, who produced this and so many other albums. They had a very, very close professional relationship, still do. And I mean, he's also like a real Jewish character. And she had done two other albums before Tapestry. One was a group album, and one was a solo album. And neither of them made any, uh, break into the music market, but they were good beginnings for her, testing out certain things. And Adler really felt that what was missing in those albums and what could be very powerful was to foreground her, not to have a whole lot of instrumentation. In general, there are a few exceptions on Tapestry, um, but to make it about her and her piano and her voice and the authenticity that comes through. And to me, that is one of the biggest characteristics of her music. And I think it's the reason that it's so, it's lasted as long as it has, because it's really someone speaking to you in her own voice with her own words generally. I mean, some of them were written by lyricists, but still. And Adler really didn't want to overproduce it. Didn't want to. I mean, there's some songs that have musicians singing in the background and other you know guitars and other bass guitars and things like that. But it wasn't this big hoopla. Again, with well, in Tapestry, one notable exception. But I think that was the key to it. And it's not like she developed it on her own, but she was very open to what he had to say.
It's almost a nightclub sound, right? Like a,
Yeah, yeah. She produced some albums later on about, in essence, joining her in the living room.
oh, interesting.
And yeah, and that's what she wanted to do.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the word authenticity, and I mean, I guess that's what people often say about the greatest stars is everyone feels they're talking right to you,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's no film or anything between. Um, so that's a roundabout way of asking you a sort of a book craft question because,
Mhm.
one of the themes, a central theme you have in the book is Carole King's famous reclusiveness,
Mhm.
right? Which of course translated into a refusal to participate in interviews for
Mhm.
the book.
Yeah.
But I mean, you managed, obviously, you know a tremendous amount about her, and you have this advantage of the voice coming
Mhm.
out of the songs and being so
Mhm.
direct and sort of
Mhm.
self-revealing.
Yes.
But how did you there's also so much that's odd about her. I mean, you say she's sort of a puzzle whose pieces don't quite fit, and there's the multiple marriages and the changes in direction. And how did you deal with first the challenge of writing around, a person who wouldn't be interviewed, and secondly, of turning it into a coherent narrative? Big
Well,
question,
I
right?
turned it into a coherent narrative. Well, I knew it was going to be a long shot to get her to agree.
Mm.
I thought I had a chance, and I'm a journalist, so I don't really allow myself to be stopped if I can help it. I actually wrote to her when I first got the book contract, and I got through a source, got a letter to her and just basically said, I'm doing this. Here's who I am. I would like to interview you, but not yet. I mean, I really, really wasn't prepared. I mean, I did not want her to call me on the phone and just say, hey, we can talk now. Because, like you prepare
What if
for
as every writer's nightmare is that they'll call you when you're not,
yeah. So, and it, as always, took longer than I had hoped. I was working, whatever. Um, So what I did was first, delve into her history, to the history of her family and community. I read a lot. I interviewed as many people as I could, tracking them down. It wasn't all in order. You catch people when they'll talk to you. Um, and and I was able to get a little close. I had, some very good conversations and exchanges with her first cousin who kind of grew up next to her in a summer community that her father started. It's a crazy story, and the cousin um uh, writes poetry and wrote a poem about this community. And I was like, who is this person who's writing a poem about this community? And I tracked her down. And anyhow, and it was interesting because the cousin wouldn't talk to me unless Carole King gave her approval, and Carole King did.
oh,
So,
interesting.
so yeah, so
You were
she
kind of getting there. Yeah.
I was trying to get there. And, it's just this, you just chip away at it. You talk to one classmate, and then maybe that person helps you to another classmate. And then, you wait for 2 years to go into James Madison High School. And, but along the way, I was also really trying to figure out what I was going to say. I'm not a stenographer.
Right.
I'm a journalist, and that meant, and in this case, a biographer. So that meant like trying to figure out who was this person, what was happening. I very much believe in biography that is rooted in historical and social context. So for me, a lot of it was what else was going on at the time, learning about Paul Simon and James Taylor and Joni Mitchell and the other influences on her as well. So yeah, just uh, a lot of interviews, a lot of time going through history, a lot of listening to music. That was a good part.
So, do you feel like you got the story? Like, do you have a sense of, I mean, you say, I ask this because you do say, and it's in the text on the cover, on the back cover. So
Mhm.
obviously you're not unhappy about it. You say she's this puzzle and the pieces never
Mhm.
quite fit. So what's the narrative then that, I mean, how much of the puzzle do you think you were able to see?
Um, I think I got pretty far, I think. I had mixed feelings in the end when I didn't get the interview, and I tried every which way, through the door, the side window, down the chimney, whatever. Um, I, I was disappointed because honestly, I just had things I wanted to ask her about. Um, and yet at the same time, I think, I've experienced interviewing very important, glossy figures, and they can win you over. And maybe that would have happened if I had talked to her. I don't know. Again, I mean, they're journalists I've spoken to had terrible experiences when she did grant them a short interview. Um, so I don't know, but I think it did give me more analytical distance to kind of view her life from a bit afar, even though I felt so immersed in it. Um, and I think in that case, I was able to give not just a complete portrait, because these books are not meant to be like what they say, cradle to grave biographies, and then this happened, and then this happened. Um, they're really meant to be interpretive biographies, which means you as a writer are invited to say, okay, this is important and this actually isn't important. So I'm going to stay with the important stuff. And in that sense, I really do think I got at all the contradictions and complexities in her life.
Mhm. So talk a little bit about that. What are the things she was struggling with, and how do they relate to this reclusiveness?
Well,
It's not just you. She was that way to
yeah, no, I know. You know, we have to remember she was such a young mother. She had
Mhm.
two kids by the time she was 20.
Wow.
And then two more. And I think by the time she was 30, you know, or 31 or so, that was it. But
That's almost as many
um,
husbands too, right?
oh, four
Four
husbands.
husbands, four kids, yeah.
Two
But
kids
not
with the first, two with the second, and you know, this was to say this was unusual in her profession is like just so understates it. It was so rare for a woman to be producing songs, writing them, being in the studio, directing how the music was being recorded. But to have a mother do it, it was really rare. And I don't think she ever kind of figured out. I shouldn't say that. I don't think she ever fully resolve the struggle inside of her from this incredible ambition and talent, but also this desire for domesticity. I mean, you look at the cover of Tapestry, it's in her home, and she sewed the curtains on the window, and the cat's there, and she's wearing jeans, and she's, embroidering a tapestry. I mean,
right. They're
it,
all very femininity, a lot of and the wedding, and she's wearing a wedding ring,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so there was that, she really cared about being with her children. And she had this, driving ambition and talent. And I think, she swayed from one extreme to another. There weren't any role models. I mean, who is she going to look to for this? Her peers, some of them ended up having children, but, Joni Mitchell and Carly Simon and those at, didn't have them at the time they were working together and making music together. So I do think that this was a dynamic that she has dealt with all her life. And, many working moms could relate to that.
So that does sort of lead you back to the idea. So if she was dealing with this all the time, but maybe not dealing with the feelings about it, yeah, who wants to be interviewed about that, right? I mean,
Yeah. And, those last two husbands were,
problematic.
yeah, really, really problematic. I mean, I'm not just saying this in a stereotypical way. I mean, her third husband died of a drug overdose and had abused her before
Mm.
even they married. And her fourth husband was like this real anti-government isolationist mountain man. Um,
Yeah.
as far away from Jewish Brooklyn as you could.
Takes her right off the grid, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
literally. So, um, so there's this scene anyway, and she's
Yeah.
watching, so she's winning all these awards. It's really the peak of her career in terms of recognition. And she's
Mhm.
home in California with a 10-week-old baby,
Yeah.
right? She's breastfeeding. And you talk about how she this was a decision she made and how it showed sort of the the different how she navigated the different aspects
Mhm.
of her life and how she sort of wasn't apologetic about being a mother. But I have to say, I read that and I thought, if that happened to an artist, and they might have chosen not to go, and if they were home watching this happen and missing it, I mean, that's a thing you'd never get over. And it seems like year after that, she's on album after album after album, and kind of marriage after marriage, and she never again captures that kind of out of this world recognition. And I just wonder, is that a through line at all? Is there bitterness?
I don't think so because remember she more recently has really gotten a tremendous amount of attention. She won the Gershwin Prize when she was inducted for the second time in the museum, the Rock and Roll Museum. The person who inducted her, who went on and on about what a strong influence Carole King was in her growing up and sang Will You Love Me Tomorrow, that person was Taylor Swift.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it kind of doesn't get bigger than that. Um, so I do think that she has received that recognition. Again, I think that whole scene with the Grammys, I'm so glad that you liked it. It is somewhat mystifying, but it's also emblematic because not only was she home with her then third child, Molly, uh, but the men at the Grammys did not know what to make of this woman who wasn't there and kept on winning these awards. And like I watched the sort of uh YouTube version of it because I believe if I remember my own book correctly, it was the first time that the Grammys were televised,
Right, you mentioned that.
which is why she was able to watch it in California.
Oh, interesting.
And you see them coming up again and again, and they're like, I don't know what to say. And then she wins her third award, and they say, oh, she's had triplets. It was like, really? You would say this to a
Yeah.
man? Um, so you could kind of see how she didn't want to put herself into that. And remember, she didn't know she was going to win so many. It's not like they announced it in advance.
Right, right.
So yeah, but it really does capsule. It's a capsule of the way she was trying to manage both of these very, very important things in her life.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll just ask you one more question because I'm sure there are more questions, and we're almost at the end of the hour. But you frame the book with the musical "Beautiful."
Hmm.
You start with the decision whether to go ahead with it, and then in the end,
Hmm.
she sort of embraces it. I won't give away
Hmm.
the whole thing, but it's a happy ending. But um, is that part of this idea that she's speaking to a new generation? Is that?
Hmm. Yeah, I really think she's had a renaissance. And yes, a whole lot of baby boomers like myself with curly hair, go to this. I saw it the first time, seen it three times. I saw it the first time in previews. I took my sister for her birthday. I mean, we grew up with Carole King. It was perfect. Um, but first of all, the production has done some really smart things. After Jesse Mueller, who was the person who originally played her and won a Tony and was amazing. Then they brought in a series of more kind of current, well-known to women to play her, and I think that attracted new audience. I think I do think that play, along with some other things that she's done in the last 15, 20 years. I mean, she hasn't uh, given really any big concerts for a long time, but I think it has introduced her and her music to new generations, and not just women. I've been doing a lot of radio and podcast interviews all over the country, and at least half the people who are interviewing me are men.
Interesting.
And you get the feeling like they're not doing this because, some boss told them to go and interview this. Uh, they really know her music. They're really fans. They understand the story. They're interested in the story. Some of them are musicians themselves. And this has surprised me. And I think tells a story, which is it's not just women who have been and are fans. I think there's a lot of appeal across genders and across generations.
A great artist speaks to everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, let me thank you so much, Jane. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm going to
Oh,
turn you
my
over
pleasure.
to the fans in this in the chat,
Thank
if I
you.
may. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that very fun conversation. Someone wanted to know, what did you learn about Carol's political activism through the years? And somebody asked, was she involved in the feminist movement?
Good question. So, in terms of political activism, I think it kind of began in the 1980s when she was living in Idaho. She became active in Gary Hart's presidential campaign. And what propelled her really was environmentalism, preservation of the Rockies, the mountains around her, the wilderness. And she has continued to promote that, support legislation in Congress, testify before Congress when Congress is in session, um, and then support Democratic candidates, especially on the presidential level. So she's known for that. You know, her feminism is kind of interesting. She's not one to wave banners and just sort of have a I wouldn't say aggressive, but even a notable approach to that. But she definitely made strides herself, being the first woman to do a lot of things. She brings along other women. She's, you know, tread this path that nobody else had kind of walked on before, but wants to make sure she's not pulling up, the ladder, really. And I think it's more like not what she says, but what she does. And that's, I think, how her feminism is expressed.
So, just a few comments. Somebody said that Carol's mother was not just a housewife, she was a speech therapist in the New York City schools, and that her mother was this person's aunt. So, you have a relative.
Really?
Yes, you
Oh
have a
my
relative.
goodness. Who is that? I mean, sorry,
I'll send it to you. I'll send you.
okay. Wow, I'd really like to know that. Yes. Uh, Once the Carol was older, her mother did work as a speech therapist. That is true. And then really turned back to also her dream of being in music and theater.
Mhm. Someone else said that Madison High School is celebrating its 100th anniversary this weekend. This person graduated in 1955 and was a member of the orchestra and the annual sing competition that you talked about, and that her parents at one point bought Carol's piano from her father.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
So lots of walks down memory lane.
Wow. Yeah,
Amy,
and the piano that I guess they bought from this person's father was supposedly the first piece of furniture in their little apartment.
very nice. Someone wanted to know if you knew how accurate the Broadway show Beautiful is.
Well, it's a Broadway show, so it tells a whole part of someone's life in what, like a couple of hours. I mean, it's really, really good. It's just there are a lot of things that are compressed and are missing. So her mother is a big character in the show. Her father is not. Her brother, and there were all sorts of stories about her brother who was born unfortunately with many birth defects and other. Anyhow, he wasn't uh, at home for much of her childhood, but I'm told that she made it clear she didn't want him to be represented in the play, and you can understand that for sure. Um, the the play is terrific. If you haven't seen it, go to it. I've seen it 3 times, so I really recommend it. But it is like so many plays in this genre, which are trying to tell a story about somebody's life, but also have a lot of music in them. And not just her music. What's so great about the play is that you really do hear the music that her contemporaries are doing as well. So you get a sense of where she was coming from and where she was. Um, but there's a lot missing as well.
And was she involved in the development of the show?
Well, I don't want to give away too much because I frame my book by, as Amy suggested, the sort of origin story of Beautiful, the Carole King musical, and then how it really ended up. But the short answer is no.
So it's not unusual, right, that she didn't really want to talk about the book, but she didn't want to talk about the show either. That was her nature.
Yes, at least to start with.
Hmm.
Uh, I should say though, and not giving anything away, which is the the play couldn't have happened without her approval.
Right. So as we wrap up, just again, a few more people with walking down memory lane. Someone said that she did a few live performances with Slash, the legendary guitarist from the
Yes.
hard rock band Guns N' Roses, and that brought awareness to a new audience. And someone all the way across the pond, I'm from the UK and have played her music at concerts in Liverpool, Manchester, and also when I started a music department in Jaffa, Israel. So her music was definitely appreciated worldwide. Jane, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Thank you, Amy. I want to thank the audience for joining us. I put a link in the chat to the book, Carole King, She Made the Earth Move. It is available now for you to purchase. We will send out a follow-up email and send everybody the link to this to please share. Please go to momentmag.com and sign up for our future programs. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.